So we're going to move ahead with the law a little bit now. A man named Draco was an aristocrat who, in the 7th century BC, Athens, was handed the task of composing new laws. Draco composed the city's first written law code with the aim of reducing arbitrary decisions of punishment in blood feuds between different parties. Justice has not always been dispensed by judges operating under the written or common law equally and applicable to all people. In early Athens, justice was not a matter of applying a written standard to any situation or abuse or dispute. There were no explicitly written sentencing guidelines or judicial precedents, that they could fall back on. Rather, the victim themselves were responsible for extracting retribution or compensation for any crime. If the victim was dead, the family then was left with the task to take revenge or to seek compensation. Now, these blood feuds could last for generations as families sought to avenge a loss, rarely admitting fault and always seeking some sort of absolution for what had happened. Now, it's funny, but when we talk about history, in our own country, the United States, we experienced a blood feud that lasted for years. From 1863 to 1891, the feud was the Hatfields and the McCoys. We actually had this type of blood feud in our country. Now, Draco's laws were known for their cruelty and their bias toward, again, rich landowners as opposed to those who found themselves owing money. Again, like it was set up to be, one-sided to help the privileged. A series of drastic punishments, which it's the origin of the term draconian, for a variety of crimes were not actually in force for a long period of time. They did not succeed in what their plan was. This law code, which we know only as provisions regarding homicide, were written according to the tradition and myth in blood because of their perceived cruelty. These laws came to an end because Draco's laws were later regarded as just intolerably too harsh. This is especially true in regards to punishing trivial crimes with death. Now, in 594 BC, Draco's code was repealed and new laws were created, retaining only one part of Draco's laws, and that was the rules against homicide and the homicide statutes. Those stayed. Now, the cruelty behind the laws may have been the only way to sustain power within the aristocratic party, as well as preventing, again, more blood feuds from taking place, for the next generations. So laws that govern mankind continue. So let's move ahead and let's look at the United States. Now, in 1636, the Plymouth colony, which was founded actually in 1620 by the Pilgrims, established the first written set of laws for the New World. Now, these laws were formed, they were kind of a hybrid mix of English common law and the religious laws from the Bible. Now, some of the laws were regarding capital punishment, taxes, distribution of land, indentured servitude, and trial procedures. Now, crimes that were punishable by death with this new law were crimes like treason, murder, witchcraft, arson, sodomy, rape, bestiality, adultery, and the neat one is cursing or hitting one's parents was a capital offense. They also had unique laws that by our standards seem kind of odd. By Plymouth law, if you were a member of the militia, there was a fine for not bringing a loaded gun to church with you. In law enforcement, I wear my weapon in church when I attend, and we have others, but even today it is frowned on. At that time, it was a law. When voter turnout was low, there was a fine for not voting. For those that could vote and didn't, they were fined. In 1637, the Plymouth Colony actually enacted an anti-smoking law. Now, some of the other laws, which were at this time, one of them was fornication. An unmarried couple who refused to get married were publicly whipped and spent 3 days in jail. Now, an unmarried couple who agreed to go ahead and get married were given a 10-shilling fine with no whipping. An engaged couple were given a 50-shilling fine. Cursing God got you 3 hours in the public stocks. Lying in public, 10 shillings fine and 2 hours in the stocks. Stealing, you were required to repay double the value and be publicly whipped. Gambling, a 40-shilling fine. Failing to attend church, a 10-shilling fine. Denying scripture, a public whipping. Working on Sunday, a 10-shilling fine. Now imagine those laws today, trying to be enacted or trying to be taken care of today. We move ahead to our own state of Missouri. We are governed in Missouri by what we call the Revised Statutes of Missouri. In law enforcement, we call them the RSMOs. They were first established in 1825. The Revised Statutes were created and set by the General Assembly of the state of Missouri. Now, when deciding Missouri laws, Missouri was a new state. And so also with that, the issue of slavery had to be taken into account. The Missouri Constitution of 1820 required that the legislature enact laws to ensure humane treatment of slaves. Now, they wanted the humane treatment. However, in 1825, the legislature did adopt the slave code governing treatment, but the slaves basically had no protection under law. The code was there, it just wasn't enforced. Now, we have rules and regulations to oversee about everything. We don't always like the rules, since they often mean that someone is telling us what to do or keeping us from doing what we want to do. So why do we need law or laws in general? Laws protect our general safety and ensure our right as citizens against abuse by other people, by organizations, and by the government itself. We have laws to protect and help provide general safety. One example is you can't drive your car on the sidewalk. Laws are a framework of rules that intend to conduct affairs of society. They are necessary to save the society from an uncivilized human nature and bring order to civilization. Now, I want to close with this thought. We've been talking about law, but what is the difference between the laws of God and the laws created by man? If you were to break man's laws or commit a crime, you may very well go to jail. If you break God's laws or commit a sin, you may very well go to hell. God did not give his laws to make men good. He established his laws to restrain evil and to prevent the life or to protect the life, liberty, and prosperity of his children. So then the law is our guardian until Christ came, in order that we might be justified by faith. That can be found in Galatians 3:24. A question we will all soon be facing is this, and I think it's coming sooner than what we really want to believe, is what do we do if God's law or his commandments become against the law in our own government? When governments, as they often do, conflict with God's direct command, we must obey God rather than men if we're going to be saved. To do anything less means that we fear men more than we fear God. There is going to be the time when we all say we're going to stand up, that we're going to have to walk the walk. We must obey God rather than men and stand against and do not actually, we need to encourage others to not go along with things like abortion, homosexual marriage, fornication, and other sins that are becoming more and more acceptable in our society. Every day it gets worse. Even if we suffer, God's going to be with us if we honor and obey him in our lives and in our heart. Thank you.